There's a particular kind of nerve it takes to walk out on your own 2-year-old girl, disappear for 14 years, and then come strolling through a courthouse door with a lawyer on one arm and a fresh diamond on the other, calling yourself a mother. I keep trying to find a polite word for that nerve. It's been chewing on it for months now, and I still don't have one. The closest I can get is that it's the same brass it takes to set fire to a house and then show up the next morning asking for your half of the ashes. I'd tell you I was shocked when it happened. I wasn't. I was something quieter and meaner than shocked. My name is Earl Pruitt. I'm 67 years old. I drink my coffee out of a chipped mug that says World's Okayest Grandpa. And for 14 years, I have been the only parent my granddaughter has ever really had. I say my granddaughter, but understand me, I mean my kid. Every fever I sat up with, every speech therapist and audiologist appointment I drove 2 hours each way for, every parent-teacher conference where I was the only gray-haired man in a room full of young mothers, signing as fast as my stiff old hands could manage. Blood didn't make me her father. Showing up did. 14 years of showing up did. Welcome to Dad's bold revenge. Pour yourself something hot, settle in, and remember the rule of this porch. Every single person you're about to meet had a clear shot at decency and decided it wasn't for them. If you stick around to the end of this one, do me the kindness of tapping that like button and subscribing, because it's the only way the algorithm lets an old man keep talking to you. All right, let me back up, because you can't understand the ending until you understand how we got here. My daughter, and it costs me something to call her that now, so I'll try to do it sparingly, was my only child. Her mother passed when she was 19, and after that the two of us never quite found our footing again. She got pregnant young, by a man whose face I couldn't pick out of a lineup today. He was gone before the baby came, and the baby came early, 3 weeks early, on a cold March morning in a county hospital outside Marietta, Ohio. 6 pounds even. They named her Wren, and Wren was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, and she could not hear a single sound in the world. We found out at her newborn screening, confirmed it a few weeks later. Profound bilateral hearing loss. I remember sitting in that little office with the cartoon fish on the wall, holding that baby, and watching my daughter's face do something I have never been able to forget. Most people, when they get news like that, their face folds toward the child. Hers folded away. I saw it happen in real time, the way you watch a porch swing drift back on its chain. She'd had a plan for her life, and a deaf baby was not in it. And somewhere in that room she made a decision she would take 14 years to act on, out loud, but only about 6 weeks to make in her heart. She stuck it out longer than I expected, I'll give her that. Through the early intervention, through the first hearing aids that Wren kept yanking out, through the long arguments with insurance, through the decision we made together, the only thing we ever really decided together, that we'd raise her with sign language. My daughter learned maybe 50 signs. I learned the rest. I bought the books, I drove to the community college 2 nights a week, I sat in a church basement with the local deaf association eating store-brand cookies and feeling like the slowest student in the room because I was. But I learned. You learn the language of the person you love. That's just the price of admission. Then one Tuesday in April, when Wren was 2, my daughter told me she was running to the pharmacy for diapers. She kissed the top of the baby's head. She did not kiss me, and I should have noticed that. She got in her car, and she did not come back. Not that day, not that week, not that year. She'd left with a man named Dale she'd met online, and a note on the kitchen counter that I will not read to you, because some things you carry instead of speak. Wren was too little to understand what had happened, but she was old enough to wait. For about a month, every evening around the time the light went orange, she would toddle to the front window and put her little hands flat on the glass and watch the driveway. She couldn't call out, she just watched. I started leaving the porch light on, every night, even when nobody was coming. I told myself it was so she wouldn't trip on the steps, but that was a lie I told myself for years. I left it on because I needed her to know, in the only way I could think of, that this house would always be lit for somebody coming home. Remember that porch light. It matters later, so I raised her. I'd been a cabinet maker for 30 years, ran my own little shop, and I cut my hours down to almost nothing, and took on what I could from home so I'd be there when she got off the school van. I learned how a deaf kid moves through a hearing world. I learned which teachers actually fought for her, and which ones just smiled and checked a box. I learned that the deepest conversations of my life would happen in total silence, across a kitchen table, in a language I'd had to claw my way into past the age of 50. And I learned that my granddaughter saw things the rest of us were too loud to notice. She'd watch my hands at the workbench for hours. By the time she was 6, she was sanding edges smoother than men I'd paid wages to. By 8, she was carving. Birds, mostly, at first. Wrens, naturally, little fierce brown things with their tails cocked up. By 10, the high school art teacher drove out to our house personally to ask what on earth we were feeding this child. By 13, a gallery in Columbus had 3 of her pieces in the window. And when she was 15, a single carving of hers, a life-sized figure of a woman walking away, rendered in black walnut so fine you could see the grain move like fabric, sold at a contemporary craft auction in Chicago for $3,400,000. I found out the number in the parking garage afterward, on my phone, and I sat down on the concrete and cried like I hadn't cried since the funeral 14 years before. Wren found me there. She crouched down in front of me so I could see her hands, and she signed, very simply, "Don't cry, it was worth it." Then she signed, "I always knew that one was worth the most." I laughed so hard a man 2 cars over asked if I needed help. I waved him off. I was fine. I was better than fine. I had this kid. Now put down whatever's in your hand, because here is where the story turns. 14 months after that auction, my phone rang on a Wednesday afternoon while I was gluing up a drawer box. A woman's voice, smooth and expensive, the kind that sounds like it charges you just for picking up. She said her name was Marlene Voss, and she was an attorney reaching out regarding, and I'm quoting her, "the financial well-being and proper guardianship of Wren Pruitt." I set down my glue brush real slow. I asked who her client was. There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause where you can practically hear somebody deciding how to drop a bomb gently. And then she told me, "It was my daughter." I want to describe what went through me in that second, but there isn't a word for it in English. It's somewhere between rage and disbelief and that specific cold drop in your gut when you realize a person you'd written off forever has been standing behind you the whole time. I went very still. The dangerous kind of still, the kind my late wife used to call my table saw quiet. I asked Ms. Voss to repeat the name. She did. I asked her, polite as a deacon, exactly what her client's concerns were. Marlene Voss explained, very professionally, that my daughter was prepared to petition the family court for conservatorship over Wren's finances. That as the biological mother, she had standing to raise questions about whether a 67-year-old man with no formal art world experience had properly managing the substantial assets of a vulnerable disabled minor. Vulnerable. Disabled. She used those words like crowbars. The implication, sanded smooth but unmistakable, was that I'd been using my deaf granddaughter as a money tree. I set the phone down on the workbench. I walked to the window. Out in the side yard, under the big silver maple, Wren was sitting on the grass with a chunk of basswood and a knife, completely at peace, shaving curls of wood into a little pile by her knee. I watched her for a minute. Then I picked the phone back up and I told Marlene Voss, "You go ahead and tell your client she's welcome to try." And I hung up before my voice could do anything I'd regret. 3 days later, I was in the local paper. I still don't fully know how she moved that fast. Money buys speed, and a man accused of exploiting a deaf teenage artist is the kind of headline a tired reporter doesn't have to work for. By that Friday, I had people I'd built kitchens for 20 years ago calling to check in. My old shop foreman called. A woman with a camera crew knocked on my front door at 7 in the morning, like that was a normal hour to ambush a senior citizen. And here's the part that genuinely stole my breath. My daughter didn't just come back with a lawyer. She came back with evidence. Forged emails. Documents made to look like I'd quietly rerouted Wren's auction proceeds, set up accounts in my own name, signed contracts she'd supposedly never agreed to. None of it was real, but it was clean, and it was professional, and it was built to fit a story the public already wanted to believe. Poor disabled girl, greedy old guardian, brave mother riding back into town to save her child. People were sharing it before I'd said one word in my own defense. Overnight, I went from the man who gave up his business to raise an abandoned deaf baby to a monster who'd been farming her gift for cash. I sat at my kitchen table that Friday night with my reading glasses down on my nose, scrolling through it all, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Real fear. Not for me. Let them say what they wanted about a worn-out old carpenter. I was afraid for Wren, afraid of what this circus would do to the one place on earth she had always been safe. Now. And I'll be honest about the why, because I know you're wondering, and because I went and found out, my daughter didn't wake up one morning missing her child. I learned later, through her own attorney's eventual disclosures, that Dale had left her 2 years back and taken most of what they had. She was 41, behind on everything, drowning in a kind of debt that doesn't forgive. And then one morning she saw a headline with her abandoned daughter's name and the number 3.4 million attached to it. That was the whole maternal awakening. $3 million wearing the costume of a mother's love. The most expensive coincidence in the world. My lawyer was a man named Hank Brody, 61, family court for half his life, the kind of fellow who wears the same 3 ties and has seen every flavor of human ugliness there is. He sat across from me at that same kitchen table on Saturday morning and laid it out plain. Earl, she's framed this beautifully. We have to get ahead of it fast. Affidavits, a forensic accounting of every dollar, character witnesses, the works. The truth's on our side, but the truth's slow and the noise is quick. I nodded. My mind was already running back through 14 years of paperwork, every receipt, every IEP, every audiology bill with my name as the only parent in the room. I had it all. I was not worried about the truth. I was worried about how loud the lie could get before the truth had its boots on. And then I felt a hand on my arm. Wren had come into the kitchen without either of us noticing, the way she always could, no footsteps to give her away. She had her notebook under her arm, the fat black one held together with a rubber band that she carried everywhere. She looked at me. She looked at Hank. She glanced at my phone glowing on the table with another headline, and her face did the thing it does that strangers always misread as blank. It is not blank. After 14 years I can read every layer of it like grain in a board, and what I saw there was not fear and not hurt. It was something closer to interest, like somebody had finally handed her a problem worth her time. She pulled out a chair. She sat. She set the notebook on the table and opened it to a page already dense with her careful handwriting and little diagrams. Then she lifted her hands and signed, slow and clear, so the old man across the table could follow, even though he didn't know a sign from a shrug. I've been getting ready for this, she signed. I started 9 months ago. I started to sign back, started to ask her how, and she held up one finger. Just one, calm as still water. Then she signed 2 words, and I will see those 2 words shaped by her hands for the rest of my life. Let me. And that right there is where the real story begins. Stay with me, because what this girl had been quietly building for 9 months, while I was busy raising her, while her mother was busy plotting, was something neither of us walking adults saw coming. If you've made it this far and you want stories like this to keep finding you, hit that like button. It genuinely helps. Thank you. Now let me tell you what was in that notebook. You want to know what 14 years of loving a child looks like when somebody tries to use it as a weapon in a courtroom. It looks like a 31-page index. Handwritten, cross-referenced, color-coded with the little markers she kept in a tin on her desk. Assembled not by me, but by a 16-year-old girl who'd seen her mother coming from 9 months out and said absolutely nothing until the moment was hers to choose. I didn't sleep that Friday night. I lay on my back in the dark, running through the forged documents, the timing of it all, the surgical way she'd dropped this on us right when Wren's work was getting national attention. It had been planned, patiently, carefully, which is funny when I think about it, because patient and careful is the most Wren thing in the world. And Wren sure didn't get it from her mother, who couldn't sit still through a single therapy session back when she still came to them. I gave up around 5, made the coffee, and sat at the kitchen table in the dark. Wren came down maybe 20 minutes later, the way she always does. She's a stone early riser, has been since she was small. She sat across from me in her gray hoodie and put the notebook between us and tapped the cover twice. Which is her way of saying, pay attention, old man. She'd kept records. That was the first thing. Everything I had ever filed, and I'm a filer, drives folks crazy. But more than that, things I hadn't even known she was keeping. A log, going back to when she was 9, of every appointment, every school meeting, every gallery contract, and who was present for it. The answer in her neat little columns was always the same. Grandpa, 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 never her mother. Not once in 14 years. The second thing made me set my mug down. She'd caught it before it started. She signed it to me plainly. 9 months back, she'd gotten an alert. She monitors her own accounts. I'd set up the first one for her, never imagining she'd run it like a hawk. And she'd seen that somebody had pulled a background check on me through a firm she traced to a law office 2 counties over. I didn't tell you, she signed, because I didn't want you carrying it before there was anything real to carry. I sat there, and I'm not too proud to admit I felt a little insulted, that my 16-year-old had been running counterintelligence on my behalf while I was out here sanding drawer boxes. I'm also not too proud to admit it was the proudest I had ever been of another human being in my entire life. The third thing was the part that finished me. She had her teacher, a deaf woman named Ms. Okafor, who'd been Ren's mentor since middle school, and whom I trust more than most of my own blood at this point. And through her, the local deaf association, an entire community of people who had watched this girl grow up, and who were prepared to stand up in any room and say exactly who had raised her. You want character witnesses? My granddaughter had 100 of them, and not one of them had ever once seen her mother's face. But the thing she wouldn't show me, the thing she just tapped the back cover on and signed not yet, was the part she'd been working on out in the shop with the door closed for the better part of a year. I'd assumed it was commissions. I let her have her secrets. God help me, I had no idea. Over the next 2 weeks, Hank Brody and Ren's attorney, a sharp young woman named Priya Chandra, who'd taken the case half pro bono the moment she met Ren, did to my daughter's case what a good cabinetmaker does to a rough board. They released the forensic accounting. Every dollar traced, clean as a whistle, every cent of Ren's money sitting exactly where it should be, in a trust I couldn't touch even if I'd wanted to. They produced the originals of the documents she'd forged, with the metadata that showed the timestamps couldn't possibly be real. And they did it slow, 14 days of it, one quiet release at a time, letting the public narrative turn over like a tide while my daughter's expensive lawyer scrambled. The hearing was set for a Thursday morning in October. The night before, Hank called and told me he'd been doing this job for 30 years, and he'd never walked into a courtroom this ready. The morning of, I woke at 4:30, lay there in the dark, doing the thing I always do when I'm scared, which is making a mental list of everything that could go wrong, a hobby that has helped me exactly 0 times in 67 years, and which I cannot seem to quit. I got up, made coffee, and found Ren already at the kitchen table in a navy dress she'd picked out herself, notebook open, 2 plates of toast set out, one for each of us, because of course she'd made breakfast. I sat. I ate the toast. We didn't talk much, which between us means we didn't sign much, which was fine. We've always understood each other best in the quiet. After a while she closed the notebook, looked at me, and signed something I hadn't asked for and didn't expect. Whatever happens today, she signed, I need you to know something. I waited. You didn't fail me. She held my eyes. I know you still think about the window. When I was little, watching the driveway, I felt my throat close. You can stop, she signed. You're the one who stayed. That's the whole story. I opened my mouth and nothing came out, and she nodded like that settled it, picked up her notebook, and signed that we'd hit traffic on the bypass if we didn't leave in 20 minutes. I laughed and wiped my face with the back of my hand and signed, "Okay, kiddo." Okay. The courthouse was a gray stone building downtown built, like all of them are, to make a regular person feel about 2 inches tall. My daughter was already there when we came in, standing near the doors with Marlene Voss and 2 associates, all of them in coats that cost more than my truck, all of them radiating the easy confidence of people who haven't yet realized the floor has shifted under their feet. She looked good, I'll be honest about that. 41 years, and clearly some money had been kind to her in the ways money usually is. She looked at me when I walked in. I looked back, and I felt nothing at all, and I think that's what unsettled her. She'd come ready for my anger, maybe my fear. Instead, she got an old man in his one good suit, calm as a Sunday, with a folded napkin of toast in his jacket pocket for the road. Then she looked at Ren, and something crossed her face that I can only call a complicated grief. There and gone in under a second, locked back down before it could turn into anything she'd have to feel. Ren looked at her the way she looks at most things. Steady. Curious. Not 1 ounce of fear. She gave her mother a small polite nod, the kind you'd give a stranger holding a door, and her mother flinched. I saw it. Just a flinch. I'm not going to walk you through every legal minute, because watching Hank and Priya work with 2 weeks of airtight documentation behind them was less like a courtroom fight, and more like watching 2 patient people calmly assemble a finished puzzle in front of a woman who'd sworn the pieces didn't exist. Marlene Voss was good, I'll give her that. She fought the document releases, called it a harassment campaign, tried to reframe a voicemail my daughter had left years ago. A voicemail saying in her own voice that she couldn't do the deaf thing, as taken out of context. I'll let you decide how much context that one was missing. But by mid-morning even I could read the room. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Judge Annette Coyle, who looked like she'd seen every shade of human foolishness and been mildly let down by all of it, had the particular settled expression of someone who'd already made up her mind and was just letting the process finish itself out. At 11:15, there was a short recess, and that's when Wren stood up, smoothed her dress, and signed to Priya that she wanted to make her offer now, before they reconvened. I'd known it was coming. She'd told me the night before. But knowing a thing is coming and watching it happen are two very different animals. Priya carried a sealed envelope to Marlene Voss during the break. Inside was a single type page I'd read the night before. 3 short paragraphs in language far more restrained than I could have managed. It said that Wren Pruitt was prepared to stop all further document releases, make no public statements, and pursue no defamation claim against her mother. Provided her mother withdrew the petition entirely and permanently, waived any future claim to Wren's finances or affairs, and simply left. In exchange, Wren would never speak of her publicly again. That was it. A clean, dignified door held open. I watched Marlene Voss read it and lean in close to my daughter in the corner of the hallway. I watched my daughter's face do the math behind her eyes, the weighing, the calculating, the working out of whether she still had a single card left to play. Then she looked up, straight at Wren across the room, and she shook her head no. I don't know what she was thinking. Maybe she thought it was a bluff. Maybe 14 years of being gone had genuinely convinced her she still held some power over this girl. Maybe she just couldn't make herself walk away a second time without taking something. Whatever it was the wrong call, and Wren had known it would be. She turned and looked at me, and for just one flash I saw something in her face I hadn't seen since she was very small. Not pain exactly. Something older than pain, something that had been felt and folded and put away a long time ago, surfacing for a second on its way out the door for good. Then it was gone. She reached into the long, flat portfolio Priya had been carrying all morning, the one I'd assumed held documents, and she drew out a set of wooden panels wrapped in brown paper and quilting cloth. She handed them to the court aide with a written note of instruction. The aide, looking thoroughly confused, carried them to the front of the room. When court came back in, and the panels were unwrapped and stood up along the rail of the jury box, where the whole room could see them, Judge Annette Coyle looked at them, and went still in a way I will remember the rest of my days. Because there were 14 of them. 14 carved relief panels, one for every year of Wren's life from age 2 to 16, each one the same subject seen through a child's eyes from a child's distance, a woman, walking away. The first one, age 2 and 3, was rough and tender and warm. The woman big and close, carved from honey-colored cherry, her back turned, but the whole thing somehow hopeful, the way a tiny child carves the idea of a mother out of pure missing. By age 6, the wood went cooler, the figure smaller in the frame, more space around her. By age 9, the woman was barely there, just a suggestion at the far edge, and the rest of the panel had filled up with something else. A house, a porch, a window, and a light burning in it. By age 12, she was gone from the wood entirely, and what was left was the house, the maple tree in the yard, a workbench, and an old man's hands. The panels for the last few years had no woman in them at all. They were just home. A girl at a bench, a dog we'd had, the porch. And the final one, age 16, was different from all the rest. There was no absence in it. No grief, no searching, nobody walking away. It was simply our front porch in the evening light, the steps, the maple, and the porch light burning above the door. And carved into the bottom edge in Wren's small, precise letters, no title, just a line. He left the light on. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the heat ticking in the old radiators along the wall. I looked at my daughter. She was staring at those 14 panels, the way you stare at something that cannot ever be taken back. Her hands were folded in her lap, and she had gone very, very still. And for the first time since she'd walked back into our lives with her lawyers and her forgeries, and her second-hand maternal concern, she looked exactly like what she was. A woman who had made a choice a long time ago, and was only now, in carved walnut and cherry, fully understanding what it had cost. Marlene Voss leaned over and said something low. My daughter closed her eyes. The petition was withdrawn before the lunch recess. She left the courthouse without a word. No statement, no scene, no parting shot. She walked out the front doors, got into a dark car at the curb, and was gone. I stood on the courthouse steps in the cold October air, and felt something I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize the shape of it. Not silence. Quiet. The specific kind of quiet that only comes when a thing you've been carrying for years finally, all the way, sets itself down. Wren came and stood next to me. We watched the street a minute, both of us just breathing the cold. I turned and signed, "How do you feel?" She thought about it the way she thinks about everything, genuinely taking her time. Then she signed one word, "Settled." I nodded and signed, "Yeah, me too." She looked up at me and signed, "Can we eat now? You only had toast." I laughed out loud, the kind of laugh that bounces off old stone, and put my arm around her shoulders and signed, "Yeah, kiddo. We can absolutely eat now." We drove to the diner out on Route 7 we'd been going to since she was 7, the one where the waitress Donna learned to fingerspell Ren's order so she'd never have to write it down. We took our booth by the window. We ordered the usual. The October sun came through the glass at that low gold angle that makes the whole world look like something worth carving, and Ren pulled out her notebook, turned to a clean page, and started to sketch. I drank my coffee and watched the cars go by and didn't say anything, because some moments don't need words, in any language. Some moments you just sit inside and let them be exactly what they are. That last panel he left the light on hangs in her workshop now, dead center on the wall where the morning light hits it first. She built the frame herself. I asked her once why that one got the place of honor, and not one of the warmer early ones, the ones with more color in the wood. She signed, "Because it's the truest." I asked her what she meant. She signed, "It's the one where I stopped watching the driveway." I stood there looking at it a long while, the porch, the steps, the maple, the light over the door. And I signed, "Is that supposed to be me? The light?" She gave me a look that was almost a smile, and a Ren almost smile is worth more than most people's whole laughing fits. "It was always you," she signed. "The man who stayed, and the girl who turned 14 years of waiting at a window into the most careful, most exact, most dignified piece of work I have ever seen anybody build out of grief. My granddaughter, my kid, she never needed saving. She never did. She just needed one person to leave the light on, and I will leave that light on for that girl every single night I've got left in me." If this one reached you, do me the favor of hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, family-first stories like Ren's. And as always, thank you for sitting on the porch with me. I'll see you on the next one.